Ready to kind of rethink what it means to be a king. Buckle up, because today's deep dive is all about Christ the King. But get this, we're not just talking about some, religious figurehead.
Right.
We're diving into a powerful idea, one that challenges our assumptions about power, authority, and what it really means to, build a life of meaning.
Yeah.
And don't worry, you don't need a crown or a scepter for this one.
What's fascinating about this concept, even if you aren't religious, is how it speaks to something universal, that deep human desire for purpose, for belonging, for a world that reflects our best selves.
Exactly. And the reflection we're diving into today unpacks this beautifully. It paints this incredibly striking image. Christ as king, but not in the way we usually picture it. This is a king crowned not with gold, but with thorns, reigning not from a throne, but from the cross.
Yeah.
Talk about turning the concept of power on its head.
It really makes you question everything you think you know about leadership, right? We're wired to connect kingship with, dominance, with being at the top of the ladder. But here, we see authority rooted in humility, in sacrifice, in embracing even suffering for something larger than oneself.
It's like the ultimate plot twist. True leadership isn't about wielding power over others, but empowering them.
Right.
But how often do we actually live that out in our own lives, right?
That's the million-dollar question. And the text gives us this amazing example to illustrate this radical kind of leadership. It talks about the good thief being crucified alongside Jesus. Can you imagine, even in that moment of utter despair, this man sees something different in Jesus, something the crowds mocking below miss completely. He recognizes Jesus as a king and asks to be remembered when Jesus enters his kingdom.
Wow, that sends chills down my spine. It makes you think, if he can see kingship in that situation, are we missing the signs of this kingdom in our own lives? It really highlights that this kingdom isn't some far-off fairy tale land. It's present wherever love, justice, and peace are allowed to flourish.
Exactly. It's in our families, in our communities, in those small acts of courage and kindness that happen every single day. It's not about waiting for some grand event. It's about recognizing those glimmers of the kingdom that already exist in our world.
So where do you see those glimmers in your life? It's a question worth pondering. Maybe it's that quiet act of forgiveness, a community rallying around someone in need, or simply choosing to meet hatred with love.
And this is where things get really interesting. This concept of the kingdom isn't just a passive observation. It demands something from us. The reflection lays out 4 life messages. And let me tell you, these aren't just suggestions. They're about actively building this kingdom with our choices and our actions. The first life message really challenges us to, look in the mirror and ask ourselves, am I truly living in alignment with the values of this kingdom? It's about recognizing that being a citizen of this kingdom isn't like a passive title. It requires action, commitment, and sometimes a whole lot of courage.
It's like the difference between, admiring a beautiful garden and actually getting your hands dirty, planting the seeds, pulling the weeds, and doing the work to help it grow.
Precisely. And that leads us to the second life message. Are we giving Christ authority in our everyday lives? Now, before you think we're talking about some external rule-following kind of authority, let's be clear. It's about embodying the values Christ exemplified. Compassion, humility, radical love, are those the guiding principles in your life?
It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk, right?
Yeah.
It reminds me of something I heard recently. Your life is the message. It's not about preaching from the mountaintops, but living in a way that reflects those values in every interaction, every choice we make.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the third life message. Embracing humble service as a way of life. This one really flips the script on what we usually think of as, power. Remember, we're talking about a king who washed his disciples' feet, who consistently chose service over status.
So how do we translate that into our modern lives? It's not like we're all washing each other's feet these days, although maybe we should.
Maybe. But in all seriousness, it's about asking yourself, where can I be of service in my own unique way? Maybe it's volunteering your time, using your talents to help others, or simply being present and offering a listening ear to someone who needs it.
It's about recognizing that true leadership often emerges not from a place of authority, but from a place of humility and service. It's about lifting others up, not climbing over them to get ahead. Okay, we've talked about commitment, aligning our lives with Christ's example, and embracing service. What's the fourth and final life message?
This one might sound simple, but it's perhaps the most challenging of all, living out the radical law of love for God and neighbor. And when we say neighbor, we're not just talking about the people who live next door.
It's about expanding our circle of compassion to include those who are different from us, those who challenge us, even those with whom we disagree.
Exactly. This radical love calls us to confront our own biases, our prejudices, and actively work towards a more just and equitable world for everyone. It's about recognizing the inherent dignity and worth of every human being, regardless of their beliefs, their background, or their station in life.
And that's where things can get a little, uncomfortable, right? Because this kind of love requires more than just good intentions. It demands action, even when it's hard, even when it means challenging the status quo.
Yeah, it's about asking ourselves, how am I showing up for those on the margins, those whose voices are often silenced? It's about dismantling systems of oppression, speaking truth to power, and using our own privilege to amplify the voices of those who are often overlooked.
It's about recognizing that building this kingdom, this reality of love, justice, and peace, isn't a spectator sport. It's a collective effort. It's like
A relay race.
a relay race where we each carry the torch for a while.
And if we're feeling a little daunted by the task, the text reminds us that we're not starting from scratch. The kingdom of God isn't some far-off utopia. It's already here, woven into the very fabric of existence. Every act of love, every step towards justice, every moment of peace, no matter how small, contributes to its growth.
It's like that quote we talked about earlier, there's a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in. And those cracks, those glimpses of the kingdom, they're everywhere if we know how to look for them.
It makes you think about the good thief, right? He saw a glimmer of that kingdom, even in the darkest moment imaginable. He reminds us to approach the world with open eyes and open hearts, ready to recognize the divine spark present in every human being, even in those we might least expect.
It's about asking ourselves, where might I encounter the kingdom today in the most unexpected places? Maybe it's in a moment of forgiveness, an act of unexpected generosity, or a community coming together to overcome a seemingly insurmountable challenge.
The key is to cultivate that sense of wonder, that willingness to look beyond the surface and see the interconnectedness of everything, to recognize that we're not just isolated individuals, but part of something much larger than ourselves.
And that brings us back to the heart of today's deep dive, Christ the King. It's not just a title, it's an invitation to see the world through the lens of love, justice, and peace.
It's a call to action for each of us to ask ourselves, how am I contributing to the growth of this kingdom? How am I reflecting the light of those values in my corner of the world?
And on that note, dear listener, we'll leave you with this final thought-provoking question from the text. If the kingdom of God is already within and among us, how can we, like the good thief, recognize its presence in the unexpected and contribute to its growth?
It's a question worth carrying with us throughout our day, a question that can guide our choices, inspire our actions, and remind us that even amidst the chaos, we have the power to build a world that reflects our deepest values.
So keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep building that kingdom, one act of love, one step toward justice, one moment of peace at a time. Until next time, keep diving deep.